The worst is when you have somebody who's an alcohol dependent or substance abuser, and they come in and the kids don't know. Is dad going to be throwing haymakers today, calling them all kinds of names under the sun, threatening everything you could think about? Those folks will then resort to the mental warfare. And tragically, sometimes it works. Most people think the real work doesn't start until the divorce is over, but it really starts at the time the relationship is over. The people who struggle most are the ones who are still kind of tied to the relationship while the divorce process is unfolding. I tell my people all the time, you are dealing with your 500th divorce, but to this client, it's their first. That perspective has to be front and center. Regardless of how many thousands of times you've done this, it's still there first. I would rather live with my pride in a shoebox than without my pride in a mansion.
Today, we're going to switch from beyond the briefcase to beyond the breakup, the real work of family law. Today, I have Alex Peterson. He's a family law attorney in Naples, Florida, and we're going to just jump right in. Alex, first of all, thank you for coming today.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
And I want to start by, talking about kind of how we met. You and I met. We were both starting our law firms here, and we were still trying to figure out things, what to do about what.
Yeah.
And fast forward 10 years, and you have how many lawyers working for you?
11 today.
And what's the size of your team?
27, I think, 26.
And that's with your paralegals, support staff, everything.
Admin, sales team.
10 years ago, how many people did you have on the team?
Oh, I would say 4 or 5, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe fewer.
Okay. And do you do anything any other practice other than family law?
Nope. That's it, 100%. What
initially attracted you to that area of law?
I was adopted at 5 by my stepfather. I never met my biological dad, still haven't. And, something that I kind of kept with me, you grow up thinking about that and it's a part of your life. And there's a weird part of you as a kid who's like, something's wrong with me and I'm not worthy enough and blah, blah, blah. And you live that whole life growing up and then you become a professional and your life goes on and that sort of stuff is still kind of within you. And then I started meeting clients after I started my own practice and I was doing whatever came in the door. And it was, DUIs or lemon law or anything. And everything just felt kind of like unnatural or unusual to me, except the family law. Everything in family law felt very organic, very natural, comfortable. I loved it. And I think it was because of my own story. I then started opening up and sharing that story with my clients, and it made an instant bond because now we had a shared kind of life experience. Everybody's coming in. Everybody you encounter has a family that's imperfect.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just made it really easy for me now to continue to grow and draw people who also want to help families in crisis.
That's really that's empowering, to people out there not quite sure what they want to do, whether it's a lawyer or even really any expert, do what sort of feels natural, right? We kind of go against the grain often. Speaking of what's natural, what's a random skill or a hobby that you always wanted to learn?
Ooh, I can juggle, but I've never been able to juggle objects that are really unusual. So I guess I'd like to be able to juggle like 4 flaming, sticks or something like that. That'd be pretty cool because I can juggle 3 of anything, but 4 of something is just escaped me.
What's the most dangerous thing or complicated thing you've ever juggled 3 of?
Oh, that's a good question. Nothing too dangerous, but maybe being stupid in a store with something like glass just to make my kids freak out.
Yeah.
Like 3 glass ornaments that, of course, if I would break them, I'd buy them, but I just would do it to freak them out.
You mean, would you do it in the store that sold them?
Yeah.
Oh,
and so that way they'd go and run and tell their mom, my wife, and that was just always a fun thing.
Yeah, way to set a good example. Don't touch that, right? And maybe you just have to break one and then go pay for it.
That's right.
Really bring the example full circle.
I haven't done that, but I would. If I broke it, of course I would.
All right. So back to what you do. What's something that people misunderstand about custody or divorce work?
Oh, there's about 100,000 things, Matt, but probably the biggest would be that we have complete control. We do not. I tell everyone, how much would you tell me it would cost to build a house if every night you went to bed, somebody came and destroyed some of it? We don't know what part. We don't know how much. And we don't know with what tools. And then the next day you had to get back up and try to keep building. that's a family law or custody case because we're only half of the equation, or really only a third. You got the judge, the judge's office, and then your opposing party inside. So if they're tearing the house down every night when you go to bed, doesn't matter what you're building. We only can control so much. So unfortunately, they just got to be comfortable knowing we're doing the best we can, but with one oar in the water, there's going to be a part of this boat that moves away we're not expecting.
It's interesting. So you help bring your clients' perspectives or opinions into perspective as to what you control, what you don't control.
That's correct.
Well, if you're I know you don't get to pick your clients. And my first several months in practice, I was at a firm that all they did was family law. So I really learned a lot in a short amount of time. And one of the things that stuck the most is that you don't get to choose your clients, meaning you don't pick the husband or the wife or the husband or the husband. You don't pick which spouse you get. You also don't pick which one is going to have the means of paying for the representation. In some cases, you have the spouse that doesn't have the means. In others, you have the spouse that does. Do you have a different approach, or do you believe any attorneys out there take a different approach depending on which side of the token they get, the one with the means to pay versus the ones without?
Yeah, that's another really deep one. I think there's a lot of lawyers who won't admit it, but I think they make decisions that prolong cases when they have a moneyed spouse. And that has been at the very outset, an absolute never with my firm. And I think that's part of the reason we've grown so much is because the people spread by word of mouth. Hey, listen, it's expensive, but they're honest with you and they're never going to try to screw you. We're on your side here. As much as it may suck and much as it may be expensive, we're never going to prolong a case for our own gain. And I can't say that about the industry at large. In fact, there's a pretty strong reputation, the opposite of that. Mm-hmm. Now, with respect to, do people make decisions if they have the spouse with lesser means? Occasionally I would think they might try to pull punches or shortcut things and short circuit things. But we've also said our differences from the industry, saying you just can't. These things are too important. So if you can't financially afford to do this the way it needs to be done, we're probably not the place for you because the result's going to reflect that. Or we're going to write you and tell you, here are all the options available to you that really could increase your chances of success. And if you choose to forego them because of financial inability, at least our conscience is clear. We've told you this is what we think you should be doing to best benefit yourself and your kids. And then, interestingly enough, Matt, maybe it's the region, but I think it's just the reality. Once you present it that way and people are really comfortable knowing you're not screwing them, you're just trying to help them, they find the way. They find a family member or a friend or an employer or a lender or something to make it happen because they can feel you really believe in this process.
Well, let's talk about that because the process can be a very emotionally charged at times.
Sure.
And I've heard, I learned early on that criminal law attorneys deal with bad people at their best, and family law attorneys deal with good people at really their lowest point.
Right.
So how do you handle emotionally charged cases?
There's a lot of different techniques and approaches. Each person's very different, though, in how they're emotionally worked up. Some are frustrated about some tiny things that you think are immaterial, but they're really important to them. So you can't be dismissive. You have to, I tell my people all the time, you are dealing with your 500th divorce, but to this client, it's their first. That perspective has to be front and center. Regardless of how many thousands of times you've done this, it's still there first. So that requires an explanation of the simplest things to us. We got to explain what that is. A case management conference might be completely old hat to a lawyer who's been to 10,000 of them, but you have to explain what a case management conference is to that client every time.
Do you feel that makes some lawyers have trouble dealing with the redundancy of it, and eventually they sort of revert to human nature and they're exhausted just like their clients?
No question about it. We have a podcast for the firm called the Florida Family Law Podcast where I've put out a bunch of episodes that are about the more routine and mundane things, and we encourage our clients to go listen to those because they're free and they're uniform. Mm-hmm. So that way, if they want to learn what a case management conference is, just go pull up episode 7.
That's great.
It's not that, but that's the resource for them to avoid that because, yes, no question, human nature is inevitable. It wins always, right? So we definitely play to being aware of that. And there's a great book I love called Working with the Law by Raymond Hollowell. And it's not about the law in a legal sense. It's about the law, God's law, universal law, energy law. And one of them is the law of non-resistance. And that's one of our core values. And you just think about water flowing down a mountain. Let's not be this boulder that's trying to redirect water to go back uphill, right? Yeah, sure, it can be done, but it takes a lot of engineering. Let's just find a way to make it go slightly to the left and still downstream.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Tell us about the podcast. Do they just what do they search for to find your podcast?
The Florida Family Law Podcast. Purple background, silver microphone on the front, palm tree.
All right, seems pretty straightforward.
Yep.
Now, you also, other content you're putting out, you've written quite a few books now. You like to get things out in the written word. What are some of the books that you've written?
I've written the Florida Divorcee's Guide to Child Custody, and I think maybe called Handbook. That one's like 10 years old now. The more recent one is the book about prenuptial agreements called Why You Need a Prenup, and Everyone You Know Does Too. And I include a lot of horror stories and things I've seen.
We might have to have you come back and do a whole episode on pre and post nuptial topics.
Would love
that's
to.
Loaded. That's loaded. And,
yeah.
Well, that's interesting. Where do they find? Where can anyone find those books?
Those books are both free for download on my website, familyfirstlegalgroup.com, and that's all spelled out. So family and then FIRST Legal Group.
Okay, very cool. Well, shifting a little bit to, what happens after, right? The aftermath and the rebuilding process of the dissolution or the custody battle. Why is the real work just beginning after a breakup?
Well, I think the way you said that is perfect. Most people think the real work doesn't start until the divorce is over, but it really starts at the time the relationship is over, which is well before the divorce is over. And so the people who struggle most are the ones who are still kind of tied to the relationship while the divorce process is unfolding. The people I see who get through it best are beyond the relationship loss. They've grieved the conclusion, and now this is a formality. So that's why I really love the intake and sales level more than the legal practice side, because that's where they're making the decision to end it or not. And that's such a huge, huge decision. And it's such a huge responsibility for the people in my shoes and the people on my intake team's shoes, because we're never forcing anyone to conclude a relationship. But at the same time, I am repeatedly meaning you, Matt, or whoever's calling me, your biggest advocate. I would never personally tolerate the sorts of things that I hear my clients calling in with. I just never, ever, ever, ever would, one, be in a position where I had to tolerate it. I would not allow myself to be in that position. And two, I would rather live with my pride in a shoebox than without my pride in a mansion. And that's my own personal position. So there are plenty of people who come in and I'll say, why are you tolerating this? You deserve better than that. You're a child of God. You're my brother or sister in this world, and you get one life and only one. Why are you tolerating this? And a lot of it is spiritual. A lot of it is financial. A lot of it's familial, the embarrassment of family. And there's a very, very deep legs to it. But that's what I love about the business. This is I get to bless everybody I encounter, and I am blessed by dealing with the most personal things ever, and it's a professional relationship. It's a really great business.
Well, on that note, when people come to the realization and they're starting that work of rebuilding the aftermath of the breakup, how can people protect their peace and just start fresh? It's such a mental game. It's all upstairs. I mean, part of it is you have to have financial security, at least for the first 90 to 120 days. It's going to take a little while to see a judge. So I think everybody needs to have 90 to 120 days of living expenses and legal fees at the ready to really avoid a calamity. But most people can find that either through a credit card or a family member or a friend or someone they can then repay. But beyond the financial security of not being homeless and being able to feed yourself and your children, it's all the mental game. I have seen so many. I mean, right now in the moment, I can think of at least 3 or 4 current active clients who just their exes
know they're going to lose the legal game, meaning they know they're going to lose half of their assets and they're going to probably have to pay some child support or alimony or something, and the kid's situation is not going to be ideal for them. So not our client, but the other side. But our clients are falling prey to the other side's mental warfare. They know they're losing the legal game, so what do they got left? All they got's the mental warfare. And that's text bombing, that's, calling them all kinds of names under the sun, threatening that they're going to release pictures of them online, that they're following them on dating sites and they're giving them guilt about that. Everything you could think about, those folks will then resort to the mental warfare. And tragically, sometimes it works.
I'd imagine more often than not it works, depending on what stage that client comes to you post-breakup.
Well, I think we have a pretty good track record of spotting it early and helping people through it to comfort them and make them feel confident that, because the game that they typically resort to almost immediately is your lawyer's lying to you to make this more expensive and to go to court, and you're never going to get what you want.
Mm-hmm.
So they begin to believe that. And nothing can be further from the truth, because we have the case histories of prior examples where we know what wins and what loses. Mm-hmm. And we got these hundreds of 5-star reviews. And I have former clients who basically right now, if I were to call any of them and say, can you speak to this person who's suffering, going through this problem? They go, yeah, give me my number. It's such a beautiful blessing of community and people so you can't pull the wool over people's eyes for 13 years and thousands of clients and, hoodwink thousands of people. It just doesn't, maybe you can pull off a heist for 10 or 20 or 50, but not thousands. So that's where they usually resort to first, is to try to plant that seed of doubt that what they're doing is they could trust them, the spouse, the cheater, or the one who's unfaithful or inappropriate or just a terrible mate. Mm-hmm. Trust me. Don't trust this objectively neutral person who's charging you. And if you have a bad result, you have a public forum to go complain about them. Why would we deceive you?
Yeah.
Right.
I'm really glad you said that, because though I haven't gone through a divorce myself, I've had family and friends go through it, and I've seen clients going through it, and I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, and everything in between in a short period of time. And the most common denominator in all family law related matters where there's a lawyer involved, particularly one on one side only, or it's one-sided, is who you can trust. And thinking that the lawyer is really only concerned about padding their own pockets. And I know you have lawyers out there that aren't all the up and up. The more lawyers you have, the more you're going to have that are unethical, unprofessional, things like that. So I'm sure there are some lawyers out there that think that way. But that's why the decision to hire the lawyer for you is such an important one, that you really have to interview 1, 2, maybe even 3 attorneys before you choose one. The other thing that I'm curious on your opinion on, there's some of these practitioners out there that they will dabble in family law, or maybe family law is 30% of their practice. And now I realize you may be a little biased in answering this because it's 100% of your practice. But when I make referrals to family law attorneys, I look for the one where it is the majority, and most of the time the super majority. How often do you notice a difference when working with an attorney where it's only a minority of their practice versus someone who does it more daily like yourself?
The results are shockingly bad for people who are dabblers. The law moves much too quickly nowadays. I think the idea of your family lawyer being the guy who handled your will, your trust, your probate, your real estate, your car accident, and your step-parent adoption, all one guy you went and saw down the street, that is as antiquated as going to get, your beef from the neighbor next door and getting your blacksmithing done that's like a tribal feudalistic kind of idea. That's how antiquated it is to me, because the law moves so quickly that if you're not staying on top of it and you're not analyzing the rapid changes, you're just doomed to fail. Not only that, but software and tools. It's like going to see a dentist who occasionally practices cardiology and occasionally practices podiatry. So they have these old dental tools, like a used ice skate and like a chisel. You're going to get in my mouth with that thing? I want the top of the line. I got AI-driven case management software. I got, unbelievable data assembly systems. I got people dedicated to just cataloging and saving the mandatory disclosure documents, which if you hire somebody who's a dabbler, they don't even know what those are half the time. And then when they are doing it, you got some guy sitting behind a desk scanning a bunch of papers at the Home Depot or a kiosk at a Kinko's. It's just like, I can't even begin to describe to you how dangerous that is. And not only that, but I set my practice up specifically to be a family law practice because when you come into a physical office and you're in a place where they do criminal defense, real estate, and family, you may have your kids with you for your family law proceeding sitting in the same lobby as a child sex accusee. You want to be in the same lobby with your kids and a not a yet convicted, but accused sexual assaulting arrestee? That's crazy. Why? Come on now. That person, and there's no duty to disclose that to you. You know what I'm saying? So when you're in the lobby at my place, you're with other people who have children going through these breakups. There's no convicts or people arrested for charge like that. It's no way. Not even happening.
Well, I appreciate you pointing that out because I never would have thought of that. And I see people that do criminal and family law, and you think, oh, well, seems like a good combination. You don't think about sitting in their lobby and who your kid or you yourself might be next to. So speaking of children, though, that's one of the most challenging aspects of a dissolution, especially when you have minor children and co-parenting. So what are some tips that you can offer our listeners for successful co-parenting post-divorce?
Well, a lot of that's in the book, so definitely recommend going back to the book about Florida divorcing, kind of co-parent guide. Parenting coordination is really valuable. I have an episode of my podcast about parenting coordination. Have a couple about parenting evaluations also in there. There's a lot of great resources. I think it's a desire, really. I mean, you can read 1,000 books about how to effectively co-parent and minimize damage to kids. If you really want to, the world is not at a lack of how to do it. It's a decision. I want my kids to succeed more than I want to punish my spouse for leaving me. That's what it almost universally comes down to. It's either one of two things. It's either the spouse can't let go and is pissed and they want to take it out with vengeance on the other spouse, so they don't care about the kids because that's the number one focus, which is not often our clients. I mean, we don't represent people like that, but it happens to our clients all the time. And then the second thing is you have somebody who's distracted with a substance abuse issue or a new relationship or just the freedom of not being in the relationship. So they're distracted by the kids. They're not really focused on the kids. They're just an afterthought to them. It's usually really only those two things. When you have two parents who desire and have the same concerted effort to do what's best for the kids, then you usually have really high-level disputes, Matt, like which nice school should they go to? This nice school or this second nice school? Both of which are not going to dramatically impact the children's future success. It's just a preference of high-level thought, which those problems are terrific to take in front of a judge because you have two professionals with two professional lawyers, and they both have fair opinions as to why this program versus this program. And that's a wonderful thing to dispute, and we have a system that resolves it because both of them are well-intentioning. So I think that was getting at what you were looking for.
No, it is. And so many things came to mind when you started talking about that. And one is, wouldn't we all love to have clients like that, right? And then you have the more usual suspect where maybe they live at two different sides of town, and that's even intentionally after the breakup. And you have one that gets the children during the week because they live close to the school, and one that gets the weekends. And then you also have different parenting plans where there's a unequal sharing of custody and the time sharing is all over the board. I think, what percentage of your cases involve child custody disputes?
Oh, you mean where they can't resolve it amongst themselves or involve kids?
Yeah. Oh. Well, actually, I take that back. That involve kids where they can't truly resolve it amongst themselves.
So it has to go to court, basically, is what you're saying. We only have about 10%, maybe 12% that go to trial.
Okay.
But a much larger percent usually go to a hearing, and then they see kind of what it's like and how ugly it can be, and how imprecise. That's probably the better term. It's not ugly. It's very imprecise because of the evidence code and what you can and can't tell the judge and what the judge can and cannot hear. and how little involvement the children have. So I would say on average, we probably have 60 or so percent settle outright. They just don't even go to court once. Probably another 30% go to court at least once. And then a 10% has to go to trial because they just can't solve it.
Okay. Well, that's enough to have a good game plan for those types of cases.
No question. And it's a very important point that I train all my people on. You prepare every case as if it's going to trial. Because what we've seen too many times is people will call. This is part of I'm really grateful to you for this forum, because when people develop this kind of sinister or macabre opinion of divorce lawyers, they don't know and they haven't seen the damage. Because when somebody calls us from another lawyer who didn't prepare the case for trial and then unexpectedly a settlement fell through and now they're thrust into trial and they have no witnesses, no exhibits, they get slaughtered. And they call us up and go, what can you do to help us? And we go, it's too late. You already had the cancer diagnosis. You already had a treatment that was for the wrong type of cancer, and this thing spread. It's too late. Nobody wants to hear that. That is a devastating bit of news to hear. So we prepare all of our cases for trial in the hopes that they settle, because it's very easy to accept a settlement and avoid a trial, but it is nearly impossible to prepare for a settlement and then have a trial thrust upon you. It is almost impossible.
Interesting. So it's kind of plan for the worst, hope for the best.
Without question. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
What do you think the people who successfully co-parent, what's one thing that they seem to get right in the beginning?
You know, we have a saying, kids crave structure internally at Family First, and that came from, I'm from Baltimore originally, and a Baltimore City police chief said, kids crave structure. And I've always worked with kids, even in tutoring capacity. I work with special needs kids between college and law school. I just love kids. And he said this, and it really resonated with me. You know how sometimes you hear something and it just harmonizes with your energy and what you believe?
Yeah.
And when he said kids crave structure, he was describing it in the context that even children in the inner city who are drawn to gang activity, they're drawn to the rigid structure, even violence beyond belief. When someone steps out of line and they know what the line was, and then they're killed for it, that rigidity is actually very comforting to a child, because now there's structure, there's rules, and there's enforcement.
Wow.
So that really stuck with us, because what happens sometimes at the outset if folks aren't harmonizing is a tug of war on where the kids are staying and when and with whom. And that's not really well settling for the kids. There should be ideally there's an old structure of what the family dynamic was, and usually as it's deteriorating, it wasn't all that perfect. And now we're shifting into a new dynamic. That dynamic should be as structured as possible, as cleanly and swiftly as possible. So, you know, that takes a lot of different faces. You know, I've got guys who come in and like, I want them to have some space. I go, they don't need space. They need, if you were there regularly, you need to be seeing them regularly. The absence of you is not peaceful. They need continuation of their normal, ideally.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff. Structure's hard to provide when your life is such in disarray.
That's right.
So you guys hear that. If you're going through a divorce when there's child involved and time sharing is a struggle, remember the one most important thing is to keep a structure for your children. And I'll tell you, when you're not divorcing, finding structure and co-parenting is challenging in and of itself. Isn't that right?
Amen. Amen. And you know, it takes little forms too. It's just it's you hear something that harmonizes with you and it resonates in your mind, and you kind of start to understand it and evolve it. Even if you only have every other weekend because you're staying in a place that's not ideal for the moment, and you're just trying to get closer to them so you can have 50-50 and be within school zone. And maybe that's the plan, right? If you're stuck on your every other weekend and that's what you got for now, make those every other weekends recurring and predictable, so that way when your kids come over, they're like, okay, all right, I remember Friday night we go to Chili's when we're with dad or with mom, and then Saturdays we wake up and we make pancakes together. You know, it doesn't have to be something that costs $1 million,
right? But
to have a predictable structure, that's so valuable. Even something silly like, again, cooking together or watching we always watch The Simpsons on Saturday night at Dad's house for an hour. Okay, whatever it is, that predictability and that structure is valuable to kids. The worst is when you have somebody who's an alcohol dependent or substance abuser, and they come in and the kids don't know. Is dad going to be throwing haymakers today? Is dad going to be shouting obscenities? Is he going to be loving me so much he's kissing me 1,000 times and giving me noogies? Is he going to be awarding me and praising me? That uncertainty is so detrimental to a child.
Yeah. I think that kind of seems, to me, that seems obvious, right? But you can't really put yourself in that in your shoes, in those shoes of those people that deal with that. Well, one thing I want to start wrapping up here is if you could give our listeners, so what's one thing that you want everyone listening to sort of take away from this episode?
Hold yourself in as high a regard as you would hold the person you like most. Everyone listening can probably picture in their mind a person they either idolize or idealize. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, it's Tom Brady, because the guy's amazing and he's won 7 Super Bowls or whatever the hell it is. The guy's, God on earth to some people, especially if you're a Patriots fan, which I'm not. But what would that guy tolerate in his life? And then hold that to your own standard. I think that would be the number one, is hold yourself to a higher regard, because the most people, I find the biggest mistake is they wait too long.
They wait too long for what?
To end a relationship. They know it's over. We all know it's over. We've all known it was over. Your family knew it was over. Your coworkers knew it was over. Just be over it. Mm-hmm. Don't hang on. Don't cling. Tom wouldn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point. But I imagine some people listening are like, well, what about reconciliation? I mean, how many times have you seen a divorcing couple reconcile?
We have probably 5 or 6 a year, but the advice would still be the same, to hurry up and get started, because you can still reconcile during the process. Mm-hmm. And maybe the other person needed that wake-up call. Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Because the divorce doesn't end when it starts. It ends when it ends. And there could be 12-month layover. Mm-hmm. So if somebody's mistreating you or they have an alcohol problem, I mean, it sounds cold, but you got a personal duty, I believe, to try to get somebody help. And if they won't, you got to get out. It's just maybe that's anti-Christian to some who are listening, but I don't feel it that way at all.
Interesting. Well, I appreciate your insight. I'm sure people would benefit from reading your books, listening to your podcasts. How do people reach you at Family First Legal? Let's just remind everyone that. FamilyFirstLegalGroup.com. We're in Southwest Florida, Collier, Lee, and Charlotte. The number's on the website. It's 239-206-3664. We have an amazing non-attorney intake team standing by pretty much at all hours of the day to get you a free, no-cost consultation with a non-lawyer. And then they can set you up with a paid consultation with a lawyer if that's what it takes, or they can get you onboarded and we get you going. Excellent. That's really good stuff. Well, and so all the resources that you referenced today, aside from meeting with someone in person, are available on your website.
Correct. Under the resources tab. The ebooks are there. The podcast is there. The blogs are there. The video FAQs, it's all there.
All right. Excellent. Well, we hope you guys stay tuned in for more episodes to come with Beyond the Briefcase. We're going to continue to have conversations about law, but also life and the community at large. So thanks again, Alex, for joining us today. And thanks again for listening and for watching.